Are you a frustrated Christian? Have you ever said the words, I just want to give up? Do you wonder why it feels like your faith is always under attack? Or have you ever, like David, called out and said, God, why are you so far away from me? If you have, I want you to know one very simple truth. You are not alone. In fact, some of the greatest heroes of the Bible have dealt with frustration, anxiety, loneliness, and depression, just like many Christians are facing today. And we're going to talk in this episode about how we beat the devil as he's using these tools against us. Are you ready? This is Biblically Speaking. Welcome, my friends. My name is Jared Bowman. I realize that for many of you, this may be your very first encounter with the Biblically Speaking channel because of the nature of this topic. I've been an evangelist for about 25 years. And in that time, I've met hundreds, if not thousands of Christians just like you. And in those 25 years, I've learned one very important lesson. We're all pretty much the same. The devil wants us to feel like our struggles are unique. He wants us to feel discouraged as if we're the only one wrestling with the kinds of difficulties that we face in our life. But the truth is, he works on us all the same way. Maybe that's why Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 5, be on the alert, be sober, be vigilant. Because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking the one whom he may devour. The devil wants us dispirited. He wants us depressed. He wants us brokenhearted, discouraged, lonely, angry, frustrated, and fearful. He wants us to feel unworthy of God's love because we are unworthy of God's love. But that doesn't mean that God does not love us. And when we understand how he works, and when we understand how he tries to use our own internal monologue against us, then we will learn how to resist him. Now, I want to be careful how I start this, because as we talk about things like depression, we need to recognize that while there are spiritual struggles associated with them, there are also conditions that require help. If you're waking up every morning feeling depressed, anxious, frustrated, sad, lonely, shameful, and it's not getting better with time, and it's not getting better with talking to your brethren about your problems, then you need to get help. And this is something that was not always taught. That oftentimes we look at passages like Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always, or 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 16, rejoice in everything and pray without ceasing. That we look at those passages and we almost treat it as if it is a sin to say, I'm depressed. It's not a sin. It's a cry for help. In many ways, the feelings of shame, depression, anger, frustration, loneliness are sort of like the check engine light in your car. When it comes on, it's telling you there's a problem. It's telling you that there's something that needs to be fixed. And while the strategies we're going to talk about will help you deal with it in the day-to-day, if you're suffering from these things long-term, do not be afraid to seek out a counselor, a psychologist, someone who can sit and give you the tools to work through the emotional struggles that you're dealing with. You know, that's one of the beauties of the brethren that God has given us, and telling us to confess our faults one to another, and telling us in passages like Galatians 6:1-2 to bear each other's burdens, because by this we fulfill the law of Christ. In telling us in passages like Romans 15:1 that the strong ought to bear with the weakness of the weak and not please themselves, what he is really saying is we ought to have comfort in reaching out to one another and saying, I need help. In thinking about this, I'm reminded of how many different characters in the Bible we see tested and tried by the devil. The reality is that we do have a very real adversary. The same devil who works in our life today is the same Satan who worked on Job. By taking away the blessings of God, he wanted to see if Job's faith was genuine. He worked on Peter. When Peter first heard Jesus pronounce that he was going to die, he said, I will never allow that. And Jesus says in Matthew 16, get behind me, Satan. You're not serving God's ends, but your own. In Luke 22, that same Peter, when he said, others will deny you, but I will never deny you, is told he's going to deny Jesus 3 times, and that Satan had asked to sift him like wheat. It's the same devil that was working on Elijah when he was discouraged after the victory at Carmel, only to find out that Queen Jezebel had ordered his execution. He laid down in the wilderness and said, God, just let me die. Discouragement has always been a tool of Satan. If he can discourage our faith, he can lead us into sin. For Eve, it was convincing her that God was withholding something good from her. You're not going to die by eating the fruit. You're just going to be wise, and God doesn't want you to have that. The devil wants us to feel like we're the only ones still serving God. That was Elijah, and he needed to hear that there were still 7,000 prophets just in Israel that had never bowed the knee to Baal. The devil wants us to feel like God is far away and that our problems are too big. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to get control of what's going on in here. Whether it was Eve or Elijah or Peter, the devil was informing the internal monologue, that self-talk, with fear. And we need to stop and ask ourselves, why are we so afraid? Hebrews 13:5 says, make sure that your character is free from the love of money, being content with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. So that we confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? You know, the Hebrew writer tells us that contentment is a huge strategy against the devil. The devil discourages us by feeling like either a problem is too big and we can't deal with it God's way, or that something that we need is being withheld from us. We need to learn to see the sufficiency of God providing in his time. That's what Jesus taught in Matthew 6 when he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. That they needed to understand that God knew their needs. In the very next chapter, he tells them God is not an absentee father. The second thing we need to think about is the Elijah plan. Well, what's the Elijah plan? 1 Kings 19, I mentioned this before, Elijah is really discouraged. God has just won this great victory over Baal. Elijah was his spokesperson. Now he's on the run for his life again. He lays down in the wilderness and he says, God, I told you this was going to happen. They're wicked people. My forefathers were wicked. Just let me die. God sends an angel and he feeds Elijah. He has Elijah take a nap. He feeds him again, and then he sends him on a journey. And when he goes on this journey, Elijah comes to Mount Horeb, and he has a conversation with God, in which God first tells Elijah he's really not alone, and that his victory was never going to be about fire falling down from heaven. It was going to be about the hearts of people turning to him, and so Elijah had work to do. You know, one of the best things that we can do in the middle of difficult times is to simplify our faith. Faith is very complicated because we get it tangled up with other things. We get it tangled up in arguments. We get it tangled up in politics. We get it tangled up in culture. We need to get back to the roots of faith. You know what the purpose of a Christian is? Titus chapter 2 says it's to be zealous for good works. Ephesians 2 says God has prepared good works for us from the foundation of the world. Galatians chapter 6 says we'll reap if we do not grow weary in due time. So we should do good to all men, especially to the household of faith. We need to get back to one very simple expression of faith. Today, I can do something good. The third thing that we need to do is we need to remember that God cares. It's right there in the middle of that passage, the same passage in 1 Peter 5, where the devil is called the roaring lion. We're told exactly how we should deal with him. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. I know in this day and age, it's hard to hear pray and wait. But in reality, that's exactly what the Christian is supposed to do. Real faith causes us to take our concerns to God and to be comforted, not just when we find relief from them, but from knowing that we have brought them to him. The last thing that we need to do is we need to decide what voices to turn off. Many times our depression, anxiety, fear, anger, loneliness, and shame are made worse by voices who are not for us and are not trying to help us overcome sin. For some of us, it may be things like voices in popular culture, or the news media, or politics. For others, it may be the voices of friends who are trying to discourage our walk with Christ because they are not walking as they should. Now, as I've already said, these are not long-term solutions. This is not for dealing with long-term depression, anxiety, fear, or shame. But these are day-to-day solutions because for most of us, the battle is an everyday battle that we wake up and it's a new battle with the same adversary. And I think that's why the Bible tells us that if we resist him, not with our strength, but with God's strength, because we're casting all our cares upon him, but if we resist the devil, then he is going to flee from us. Well, there's lots of other things that you can see on the channel. I hope that this video helped, and if it did, give it a like, a share, and hit that subscribe button. We got a lot more content for you. We've got videos on evidences, videos on the book of Revelation. I've done a series of episodes on verses that we misuse and another on prayer. I hope that you'll check these out, and I hope they're a benefit to you. And as always, have a good day, and God bless.